a brand new kayak angler, I thought you grabbed a paddle, you hopped in the kayak, and you went fishing. And I quickly found out that wasn't the case when buying my first kayak. You actually need to know how to choose the right paddle. Now, the people at the store might be able to help, and more than likely they're probably not going to be able to help, especially if you're at like a big box store that they really don't know that much about kayaking. So let's talk about how to choose the right kayak paddle. There's 3 things that you always have to keep in mind when choosing a kayak paddle. Number 1, that is your kayak's width. Number 2 is your kayak seat height. And number 3 is your height. I'm a weird mix because I've got a really wide kayak, I've got a kayak seat that sits really high, but I'm a pretty short guy. I'm like 5'6". So you would think that, oh, well, he probably doesn't need that long of a kayak paddle. Well, actually, because I fish out of a NuCanoe Frontier 12 or a NuCanoe Unlimited, they're both pretty wide, and both of the seats sit pretty high. I need a longer paddle than I originally expected. First paddle that I had with my NuCanoe Frontier 12 was a Warner Skagit hooked paddle. Honestly, I really liked it. It's pretty lightweight, it's carbon fiber. I love the sleek button here. You can hardly even tell it's a button. Whenever I hand it to somebody and ask them, hey, can you break it down? They're always like, well, how? And I'm like, oh, just press this little button here. And they're like, oh, I didn't even see that. So I like the sleek look of it, the sleek feel of it. It's really great, but it's a little bit short when I set my Unlimited, which has a little bit higher seat. And I wanted a spare paddle in case I wanted to bring along a friend in my Frontier 12, and I used my Unlimited, so I got another one, the Bending Branches Angler Classic. This one is actually a few inches longer, and I didn't really notice that at first, but when I put them side by side, I'm like, oh, it is longer. That's why I like paddling it a little bit better. Another reason why I like it, it doesn't look like much, but this has saved quite a few lures for me, because I tend to find the trees, whether they're in the water or out of the water, I find them a lot. So having this little hook catcher, or whatever the heck it's called, has saved me a bunch of money. I also like that it's got a quick reference tape on it. The thing I don't like about this is the button. So it sticks up. It's just, I don't know, it doesn't look very good. This paddle is a little bit heavier. Not much, but a little bit. But overall, pretty good paddle. So how the heck did I choose these paddles? Well, number 1, I went and learned from somebody else. I bought my kayaks and paddles from Tulsa Kayak. They've been huge help. So if you have a local kayak shop, I highly recommend going in there, talking with them, and explaining to them your situation. As I mentioned, it's most importantly to keep in mind your height, your kayak seat height, how far you actually sit out of the water. So you might have a low sitting kayak seat, but your kayak sits up high out of the water, and you still need a little bit longer paddle for that. And your kayak's width. So you can actually reach over the edge of the kayak and keep paddling without having to lean a lot. And if you're ever skeptical of which paddle should I go with, the shorter one or the longer one, go with the longer one, just because you can always use it to stop yourself when you're coming up to the shore, to push off a little bit further, or if you see a snake on the log, which has happened a lot to me too, you can reach out a little bit further and say, stay away from that snake. So I recommend going with just a little bit longer paddle than you think. Nothing obnoxious. You know, if you've got a short little kayak, you're short, your seat doesn't sit very high, then don't get a big, long, obnoxious paddle, because it's going to be a pain in the butt for you. You know, stick with the one that fits you, but if it's between one that's 156 centimeters and one that's 158 centimeters, go with the 158 centimeter one. Another thing to keep in mind with choosing a paddle is what material it's actually made out of. So this one has plastic blades and a fiberglass handle. Then of course there's like the aluminum push button and little stuff like that too. But generally that's what it's made out of. Now there's other paddles that are made out of all aluminum handle and plastic blades. Those are usually the cheapest. I've actually bent those handles and they're usually heavier, and I just don't like them. So I tend to stick with a paddle in the $150 range, give or take. I like a paddle that breaks down in half. There's some that'll break down, you know, 4 pieces. If you're traveling in a small car, then I highly recommend getting a more compact paddle. But overall, I stick with a 2-piece paddle. So those are the main things you need to consider when buying a kayak fishing paddle. One item that I didn't know I needed until I bought it and started using it was the Yak Attack parking pole. If you fish shallow water, it's a must have. Go ahead and check it out in this video right here.